Welcome to I'm Your Target Demographic, and today we're preparing for the film Deadpool and Wolverine, which looks to bridge the gap between the 10 X-Men and Deadpool films and the 30 plus films and television series that make up the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Since Disney purchased what was then called the 21st Century Studios in 2019, people have been wondering how these worlds collide and how the X-Men will eventually be introduced in the MCU. So we're going to do a deep dive into history and recount what we think is important to know for this film. We don't expect you to rewatch 40-something movies and television shows to be ready for this, so let me help you. There will be spoilers here for pretty much everything, up through Logan and Deadpool 2, and also through the latest MCU films like The Marvels, as well as television shows like Loki Season 2. This is spoiling everything. If you're ready for that, let's dive in. While maybe not the chronological beginning of our story, it makes sense to start our recap with Wade Wilson. Wilson was a mercenary, paid to do other people's dirty work. He eventually fell in love with a woman named Vanessa, who sees past his bleak outlook, the violence, and his sarcasm. Things take a turn for the worse here as Wilson is diagnosed with cancer and seeks out an experimental procedure to keep himself alive. This procedure amplifies a mutant gene in Wilson that allows him to heal from nearly everything, including cancer. However, this sudden and drastic healing paired with some torture cause his face to become deformed. He returns to the real world and adopts the name Deadpool, alongside the mask and suit to hide his imperfections. The X-Men attempt several times to recruit Deadpool, but his recklessness and lack of a moral compass often puts himself at odds with their methods. He does sometimes work alongside the X-Men Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
You are...
Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
Negasonic Teenage... What the shit? That's the coolest name ever!
He eventually reveals to Vanessa that he's alive, and they're able to live happily. At least until Vanessa becomes collateral damage when one of Deadpool's targets finds him at their home. The events of Deadpool 2 introduce the time traveler Cable, whose time-hopping technology is utilized in the post-credits to undo Vanessa's death and even speak to the Wolverine from the film X-Men Origins.
Don't scratch! Just cleaning up the timelines. Look, eventually, you're gonna hang up the claws, and it's gonna make a lot of people very sad.
Huh?
But one day, your old pal Wade's gonna ask you to get back in the saddle again. And when he does, say yes.
Oh, right. Love you.
It's likely Deadpool's meddling in time travel that triggers the events of Deadpool and Wolverine, which we'll get to in a second. Other characters from the Deadpool films that will make an appearance here include his blind roommate, Blind Al, his taxi driver friend Dopinder, and some other characters that briefly made up the team X-Force, such as Shatterstar and the normal average guy Peter. Everything looks good for Deadpool as he's now able to undo every mistake he's ever made. So what could go wrong? Now zooming out, let's look briefly at the X-Men films that starred Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. We had 3 movies in the original trilogy where the Professor Charles Xavier led a school of gifted children. Gifted, meaning they had extraordinary mutant abilities. His oldest students were Scott Summers with the ability to shoot blasts from his eyes, and Jean Grey gifted with the ability to read minds and telekinesis to move things with her mind. Wolverine is brought to the school with the ability to heal. His ability to heal made him a prime target for experimentation, where a metal alloy was grafted to all of his bones, with the addition of 3 claws on each hand as well. He eventually comes to remember that he was enlisted in a military project called Weapon X, alongside Wade Wilson back in the day, and they were the ones who erased his memory and gave him the metal called adamantium. He wasn't the only one experimented on, including a character called Lady Deathstrike. We also meet his former teammate and now rival, Sabretooth. They may even be half-brothers depending on which movie you believe. Other villains to the X-Men here include the slimy Toad, the unstoppable Juggernaut, and others who typically fall into a roster called the Brotherhood of Mutants. This group is typically led by Magneto, a rival to Professor Xavier with the ability to manipulate metal. Magneto is convincing, often able to recruit the more jaded and radicalized mutants to his side, such as the fire-controlling Pyro. We also had 4 movies with a younger cast, showing what led to the creation of the X-Men. One of these movies, Days of Future Past, even showcased both versions of the cast together over various timelines. This would be a really long video if I walked through all the details, but I doubt there's a lot you need to know here. There were plenty of villains, plenty of heroes, and there's a strong possibility that some of them may appear in Deadpool and Wolverine. Hugh Jackman had one final movie, or so we believed, called Logan. This movie saw an aging Wolverine finally succumbing to a metal poisoning. He takes care of Professor Xavier, who is suffering from dementia, and inadvertently killed all the other X-Men. Wolverine also meets a cloned daughter of sorts with the same healing ability and also given claws, called X-23. At the climax of this film, Wolverine gives his life, and his healing finally stops working, as he fights off a far superior clone of himself to save X-23. He's buried, and we thought we'd never see him again. Now let's pause and take a breather. That covers like 10 movies, and these are movies that often contradict each other, things change, and it's hard to know what is considered canon. These were all under the umbrella of Fox, called 20th Century Fox and then 21st Century Fox when it was bought by Disney. Before we move on, I feel like now is a good time to explain the multiverse. I know, simple. The premise of the multiverse is that there is a reality that exists for every choice we make. To keep it related to these films, the X-Men films might be a different reality from the Deadpool films. Colossus sure doesn't seem the same. Deadpool's origin is different. There might be a reality where Wolverine doesn't die during the events of rescuing X-23. There's a reality where the Days of Future Past timeline is the truth. Then there's a reality where it's fixed. There's the reality where Vanessa died, and now there's the one where she's alive. The multiverse is all of these combined. The multiverse is the map of every reality. And one of those realities is the main Marvel Cinematic Universe, though we'll see our fair share of other realities. The most prominent reality is where the Avengers are formed, Thanos snaps away half of all life, and the Avengers then defeat him and bring these people back to life. Again, we don't have time to cover all 30 of these movies, but maybe the most important thing to cover is the character called Loki. Loki began as the god of mischief from a planet called Asgard. Because of the time-traveling antics of the Avengers, Loki was able to take a magical artifact called the Tesseract and travel through space, which created a branching timeline. One reality was where Loki stayed, and one reality where Loki traveled to another place. Well, the one where Loki used the Tesseract to hop all over the place, he was eventually captured. See, it's dangerous to let people create these branching realities, and there's a force intended to stop this. They are called the TVA, the Time Variance Authority. They are singular in the multiverse, but they watch branching timelines and they are responsible for pruning these timelines from existence. Loki is eventually pruned himself and sees where these discarded realities go, a place called the Void at the end of time. This is a wasteland where Loki even encounters other variants of himself. Variants are versions of the same person but from a different reality. In the film Spider-Man No Way Home, 3 variants of Spider-Man come together and eventually must be returned to their own realities. In the animated film Across the Spider-Verse, these characters also reference the multiverse and have a spider character for each one, and they too are weary of the web of realities getting too out of control. This wasteland is the hunting grounds for a monster called Goliath, who feeds on discarded variants unlucky enough to be caught there. Loki, alongside a female variant of himself called Sylvie, encounter the one who controls the TVA and has tamed Goliath, called here He Who Remains. He Who Remains is one of many. All of his variants once engaged in what was called a multiversal war. It destroyed many, many realities, and He Who Remains was the last standing. And by creating the TVA, he was able to help keep other realities from getting out of control. In a burst of anger, Sylvie kills He Who Remains during the finale of Loki Season 1, and we see the consequences, that branching timelines are now growing exponentially, and there is no control. We now get to Loki Season 2, where Loki sees the need to stop this, as the explosion of realities might collapse the entire multiverse. Someone must take over, and Loki evolves, and in a selfless act, takes on the role of the God of Stories, watching over all realities and everyone's decisions and helping to keep this growth in check. It is insinuated that we may never see Loki again, now that he's become this tree of roots holding all reality together. Even though He Who Remains was killed, we know that there are other variants of this character out there, and we meet one named Kang in the film Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This Kang was killed in that climax of that movie, but we see others that are starting to rise up, and they're even meeting with other multiverse versions of themselves. Kang may not always look like this, just as Peter Parker didn't always look the same. And just like Loki didn't always look the same. While we've been focusing on the X-Men and Deadpool movies, other superhero movies fell under the Fox umbrella and may make unexpected cameos, such as the original iteration of the Fantastic Four, or even the reboot version, as well as the Daredevil and Elektra films. So don't be shocked to see heroes or villains from those stories show up in the wasteland known as the Void. So will the TVA take an interest in Deadpool time hopping and creating new branching realities? What is unique about this variant of Wolverine? How will this all eventually connect to the mainstream Marvel universe? We'll see when Deadpool and Wolverine hits theaters soon. Hopefully you found this interesting. Thanks for watching.